Hello and welcome back. As you can see, in this particular game I am playing the Nürnberg, and I'm doing so only because there was a specific mission to complete in the Nürnberg. And as you could also see, this is a tier 8 game, so I'm being up-tiered in the worst possible way. There are a few other T6s, but not that much. Quite often when you see this in game, people who are up-tiered will complain about the matchmaking and basically behave like they can't do anything, and it's not even a point of trying. I think we can all sometimes feel like the hill is quite steep when we face certain matchmaking, but it also provides an excellent opportunity to not only try yourself against better opposition, or at least maybe not skill-wise, but ship-wise at least, but it also is an opportunity to get a lot more XP facing ships with higher tiers. And it's really not that difficult to do well even if you're up tiered. Obviously certain ships are easier than others, and depending also on the people you face and have in your own team. An example that unfortunately I don't have any replays of is when I played Cleveland to try and still grinding towards the Worcester. The Cleveland is obviously tier 8 nowadays, but it is still an extremely good ship, and even against tier 10s it's surprisingly easy to do well. Very often I was able to carry T10 games and easily be on top. Nürnberg, definitely not as good as the Cleveland, but it does have some good features. It has long range, which is definitely something that is advisable to utilize when you're up-tiered. It's also fairly nimble, and that does also help if you're staying closer to your max range, because it will be harder for the enemy ships to hit you, since it gives you more time to maneuver. And as you can see, I'm weaving and turning quite a lot to try and avoid damage as I secure my first kill on the New Orleans. To be fair, he did push way too aggressively. The leader support he had with him died even earlier, and he also took some beating from one of the ships I have with me. I've tried to put myself in positions where it's harder to shoot at me. But as the enemy team on this side looks like they are disappearing a bit, I need to start moving away. With the Nürnberg having 2 turrets in the rear and 1 in front, it's particularly good for kiting, so I want to try and utilize that as much as possible. And more often than not have my rear towards the enemy. Now, as you can see on the minimap, our team is doing a fair amount of lemming training here, pushing to the side where I'm currently at. In the west, we lost the leader we had, and since the North Carolina left we now only have 2 single cruisers to hold back a significant enemy force. I'm doing my best to do some damage on the ships running away from our side, but as we are losing the entire west flank, I already hear the sight I need to go back and see if I can try to help with holding them back. We also lose a second destroyer, so we basically have nothing on this side. Myoko in the west is low, and Chapayev is sitting behind an island. With destroyers on the enemy team being able to just go towards Cap, with support from several battleships, all Tier 8 because it's Massachusetts, a Bismarck and a North Carolina, and they also have a Cleveland, as I spoke about before. We lose the Myoko as well there, and this makes it even more important to try and hold them back a bit. Either giving the team still in the east time to push up and take Cap, or give them time to come back and help me defend. Enemy Luoyang spotted as they are trying to finish off the Chapayev. The battleships are getting close, so I start to turn away to do a bit of kiting, and of course to avoid being too close to the big guns of the battleships, giving them more times to evade. A typical example there. As I said before, the Nürnberg is fairly nimble, and it's not too hard to evade shells when you're at a bit of a range. The DD is in our base. So even though there is Massachusetts pushing towards the Cap, and I know there is also a Bismarck and Cleveland closing in, I am moving slowly towards Massachusetts and where the Luoyang mostly is, in order to try and get him killed. Because if he survives, that would be a massive problem for us as we try to defend our base. There are some torpedoes, but luckily I managed to avoid them, and Luoyang is detected. This game was from before the CV rework and radar rework, so I assume he was spotted by the Baltimore radar. Or maybe doesn't even have one, I don't remember for sure. Either way, he's detected and I can get him killed. My shoes also burned a bit from a few fires I got on him, but in turn I have now received a double fire that I can't repair since I did so before. But nevertheless, my shoes go down, I get my first kill. And as we can see, my team has actually come to my aid and is helping me quite a lot with the ships that are pushing towards our base. And with Massachusetts and Luoyang dead, that makes it a lot easier for us to deal with the Bismarck. North Carolina is still far away, and the Cleveland is hiding behind an island because he is very, very low. Up in the north, the enemy team went way too far and have quite some way to get back into the battle, which meaning we can quite comfortably defend our base. And focus one ship at a time since there's nothing else within range. Sadly, I don't get the kill on the Bismarck, but he goes down well, and it is suddenly not looking as bad as when the western flank pushed into our base, more or less uncontested. I have eaten a fair amount of damage. I was well aware that pushing into Massachusetts, Cleveland, Bismarck was very dangerous, but my thought was that if I could take out the Loyang and buy my team some time, that would be enough. Luckily, they didn't really focus me. I assume that was at least in part due to the fact that I'm a tier 6 and they wanted damage rather than to secure the kill. Obviously Bismarck focused me with the secondaries, but it was not enough to really take me out. So even though I wasn't really expecting to get out of that alive, I managed to do it. And now dealing with the North Carolina, we see that I'm trying to stay behind at least 2 ships here to try and make sure that I don't get too close to North Carolina, but also that I'm not the main focus for him. There is something aiming at me, but it's not in North Carolina, so I try to look behind me. Don't really see much because I want to get killed, but fail, and due to that I eat a fairly big hit from the Lyon. I survive it though, and I have about 3000 HP to spare. But it does mean that I need to be very careful, because even though we are still doing quite well, this is far from over, and me dying will not help our team the least bit. Cleveland, as we saw before, is very low, and he's about to go down. And we see all those ships that were on the AB line, they have finally made it back to the fight, but it gave us enough time to deal with the threat in the south, and we can now start making our way back north to try and get rid of the ships here. As we move forward, I try to utilize my range, but obviously also the island that's in the way here at least. Again, I'm not too fond of being the first in the line, and I start cutting away to utilize more of my range and make me a less desirable target for the Lyon. Because a good hit from battleships and I will definitely die. But with the Cossacks smoking up, they go undetected here, and I need to start pushing north again with the ships I have just east of me. So far though, I have managed to break the 100,000 damage, which, although it's not amazing, is not that bad in a tier 6 versus T8, especially not considered I basically suicided into our cap to deal with Loyang. Could have been worse if the North Carolina was there as well, but with only 3 tier 8s after the tier 8 destroyer was killed, I managed to get out of it, even though I wasn't really expecting. So 100,000 is definitely not bad, considering my intent to just go in and get the DD and probably die. I also managed to rack up 1 million potential damage, and that's really the key here, to be mobile when you're in a ship that can be, make it difficult for the enemy to shoot at you even though they are higher tier. Still doesn't mean that they will hit you every time. Well, I spoke a bit before about the Cleveland and how strong that is, even against tier 10s, and obviously the general rule of the Cleveland and other light cruisers is to stick by an island and lob shells over it, but I've also found Cleveland to be extremely good at kiting. It has good maneuverability, and if you stay again close to max range and you turn a lot, it's surprisingly effective, or how easy you can dodge shells from tier 10s and, well, any ships. What I'm trying to really illustrate with this game and the stories of Cleveland past is that even though you're up-tiered against ships of 2 steps higher, it really isn't that bad. Obviously you have to play smarter than you might normally do, but there is nothing that says that you cannot do well and that you can't carry and lead your team to victory. Mistakes will probably hurt you more than if you were top tier, but as long as you're aware of the surroundings, positions of ships, your ship, there is really no issue. And going into the game complaining about the matchmaking and how pointless it is to even try straight away is really not benefiting anyone. The game is very soon about to end. We will win this game, and it had honestly a lot to do with the fact that I went back to start the defending. I gave some time for a team to come back and help me and secure the defense and, in the end, the win. And here we have the result screens as well. We see that I managed to get 123,000 damage, which, considering I went into the base fully expecting to die, is a pretty good result. I definitely could have been doing more if I had been even more at range and wasn't so determined to get the Loyang killed and defend the base, but all things considered, it's results I'm quite pleased with. 3 kills. I had chances to get more, but unfortunately it stops there. Only 8 fires, and as we will see in a bit, not a massive amount of fire damage, but okay amount. Not that much credit or XP, but not too bad either. Base XP, however. Here we see that I managed to rack up just over 2,100. And that is almost 500 more than... It's actually over 500 more than the second best on the team and in the game, which was the Cossack, and he had 4 kills. So even though I was tier 6 versus mostly tier 8s and some tier 7s and 6s as well, I managed to outperform all of them and was by far the best player in the game. And again, that is considering that I went into our base to defend it. So this is a very good example that shows that even though you have ships way stronger than yours, you can still do well, even if you are facing ships 2 tier higher. You just have to try and be smart about it, use the strengths of the ships, use positioning, and basically just be more calculating with the risk you take. Because you obviously cannot take as much of a beating as you can if you're the top tier. Damage-wise, 40,000 on fire. Basically the rest is HE shells. And as we said before, potential damage is just over 1 million, which is pretty good considering I only have 27,000 HP. Looking at the ships are damaged, it's fairly spread out. Most of it is from the battleships, the Massachusetts, North Carolina, and Lyon, but I shoot at most of the enemy team, feels like, and scored at least some damage on all of them. Lastly, some credits and XP, but not too much since I really only played in Nürnberg for the missions and nothing else. But overall, solid game, I would say. And again, a good example of that even though you are bottom tier, you can still do very well and win the game for a team. So I hope you enjoyed, and don't complain too much about being bottom tier next time.